Perhaps one of the most amazing experiences of those early disciples would have to be the empty tomb. He is not here. One of the angels from Luke's account of the resurrection story would announce to the women who had come to complete the burial practice, he's not here. This would be one of those defining moments as the early disciples would come to grips with just what had happened. This man they had followed, this man who was Son of God, they had seen him die on the cross. His life now at an end. He would be entombed in the grave, hewn into a rock, and it would be sealed. All of this had taken place on that Friday at Calvary, that Good Friday, as they watched the final moments of the life of this prophet of God simply fade away. This man who had done so much in the world, so much that had amazed and astonished them. And no doubt they would want more of this experience in their lives. But it was not to be. He was now dead and buried, and the bottom had fallen out of their world. All that they had seen and heard would no longer be available to them because Jesus had gone from their lives. That was Friday. And as they wandered away from Calvary and from that tomb, no doubt they would come together, lost and alone. For these disciples, it may have seemed to have been the end of all that they had hoped for within their lives. But that was Friday, the day of the passion, suffering and death of Jesus Christ. But for them, Sunday would also come. That day of resurrection would also arise when Jesus would enter back into their world and into their midst. It was on this day, still in darkness, that Mary would find the empty tomb. He's not here, she would eventually be told. He is risen, as he had told you while he was with you. Friday may have been the day of despair for the frightened disciples, but it would be Sunday, that day of resurrection that once again would change their lives. Mary had found the empty tomb. It was Mary, perhaps the other disciples that Jesus had loved, who would become the bearer of this resurrection story for Jesus' disciples. She came to Peter and the other disciple to announce that the tomb was empty. Even after such an experience, perhaps the disciples still failed to understand just what the empty tomb meant for themselves and for the world. But understanding would come to them. This would be the first day of the Easter event. It was the day of the empty tomb. And from this experience, the disciples would slowly come to realize that he had risen. Today, we have the advantage of religious history as we look back at all that would unfold in those days, weeks, and months that would follow this Easter event. We know what the disciples would experience in their lives as they continue to encounter the risen Christ for themselves. There would be those moments of encounter as Jesus entered into their lives. Peace be with you, he would say to them. Peace be with you. There would be moments of healing as well, as Peter would be called to acknowledge 3 times his love of the Lord. Peter, do you love me? Then finally would there be that great commission. Go, Jesus would say to his disciples. Go and make disciples. All of this would take place in the days and weeks following the great Easter event, when Jesus, risen from death to life, would emerge from the tomb and enter into the lives of his disciples once again. It may have been difficult for the disciples to truly understand what it had all meant on that first Easter day, as Peter and the other disciples were the first to experience the resurrection. Peter and the other disciple went to the empty tomb. They each looked into this tomb. They saw the clothes lying around. One of them saw the other believed. This was indeed the start. This beloved disciple had seen all that Peter had seen, but in that moment of awareness, he believed what Jesus had said. But in time, all of the disciples would slowly come to see what that meant. And through their encounters with the risen Lord, they too would come to believe. So it is for us today. This is Easter. It is the first day of our encounter with the risen Lord. And it's a moment perhaps to simply be and reflect upon the risen Christ present in our lives. But the time will come, as it had done for those first disciples so long ago. The time will come for us to commit to that call and commission from God in our own lives. Do you love me? Jesus may ask of each of us in our own way, just as he has asked of Peter and the other disciples. Do you love me? That may be the moment for us to say, yes, yes, Lord, we love you. And our yes, our acceptance of this commission to ministry can change our lives. And that's what it's all about. Such is the Easter event that we celebrate here tonight as God's community of faith.